Because multiple angles of this incident show him holding up a cell phone and recording it, not a gun. Did he at any point pull out his weapon?
This looks like a situation where an individual arrived at this scene to inflict maximum damage on individuals and to kill law enforcement.
A Democratic senator just exposed what might be the most disturbing truth about Trump's ICE operations, and the implications could change everything about how Americans understand what's happening in cities across the country. We're not talking about typical political criticism or partisan disagreement. We're talking about a sitting senator stating on national television that federal agents might be deliberately creating chaos and violence as part of a strategy to justify seizing control of elections in swing states. That ICE operations could be less about immigration enforcement and more about manufacturing crises that Trump can exploit to interfere with voting. And if that assessment is accurate, if what we're witnessing in Minneapolis is really a prelude to Trump claiming he needs to take over state election systems because cities are out of control, we're not watching law enforcement anymore. We might be watching the groundwork being laid for authoritarian seizure of democratic processes. And the evidence connecting ICE violence to election interference demands might be more concrete than anyone realized. But before we break down how Senator Chris Murphy's testimony could expose the real agenda behind ICE operations, real quick, you cannot trust mainstream media to connect federal violence in swing state cities to Trump's stated desire to control voting machines and election systems. That's why we built Patrick Smith's show to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want analysis that actually explains what manufacturing chaos for election interference looks like, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what Murphy revealed in his CNN interview could be the key to understanding Trump's entire strategy heading into midterms. Your subscription actually matters here. Alright, let's get into what Murphy actually said and why sources suggest it could represent the most important congressional pushback against Trump's ICE operations yet. Because Murphy didn't just criticize tactics or question specific incidents. He reportedly laid out a comprehensive theory of what Trump might actually be trying to accomplish. That ICE and Border Patrol agents are being deployed to create mayhem in cities specifically located in swing states. That the violence and chaos are features rather than bugs of the strategy. That Trump could be planning to use the disorder his own agents create as justification for federal takeover of state election systems. And Murphy allegedly connected this directly to Attorney General Pam Bondi's letter demanding Minnesota hand over voter rolls in exchange for removing ICE. That's not speculation about possible motives. That could be documented evidence of election interference being traded for ending federal violence that Trump's administration created in the first place. If Murphy's assessment is accurate, we're witnessing attempted coup through manufactured crisis. Let's start with how Murphy described his reaction to Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino's CNN appearance. Because the language Murphy allegedly used reveals just how serious he thinks the situation has become. And when a sitting senator says an administration official's interview left him shaking, that suggests something far beyond normal political disagreement. Reports indicate Murphy told Dana Bash that Bovino's interview was bone-chilling, that he was literally shaking while listening to it. And Murphy allegedly explained his reaction wasn't just about disagreeing with Bovino's characterization. It was about the brazenness of lying to the American public when everyone can see video evidence contradicting the official narrative. Sources suggest Murphy stated explicitly that it takes unbelievable gall to lie so blatantly, that everyone saw video footage showing what actually happened, yet Bovino was claiming something entirely different. That the administration official told the American public a young man was brandishing a weapon, impeding officers, attending a riot, engaged in assault, when the video allegedly shows none of that is true. Think about what Murphy might be arguing here. Not just that Bovino got facts wrong or made honest mistakes in the chaos, but that the Trump administration lies deliberately and easily. That they'll lie directly to your face when you can see the evidence yourself. That level of dishonesty isn't error. That could be calculated strategy where truth simply doesn't matter if official statements serve political purposes. make sure you're subscribed to Patrick Smith Show, because Murphy allegedly made a broader point about what this lying should mean to Americans. That it should freak the American public out that the administration operates this way. That we're dealing with people who might have no relationship with truth or accountability. That if they'll lie this blatantly about something captured on video, they'll lie about anything. And a government that operates without regard for truth is a government that could be capable of anything. And sources indicate Murphy went further by arguing Minneapolis is fundamentally less safe because ICE and Border Patrol are there. Not that agents are doing their best, but situations are difficult. That the presence of these federal forces actively makes communities more dangerous. That they're there specifically to cause conflict and create mayhem. That this is the point of their deployment rather than unfortunate side effect. But Murphy's testimony allegedly didn't stop at criticizing what's happening in Minneapolis. Sources suggest he issued a stark warning about what could be coming to cities across America. And the way he framed it might reveal understanding of a systematic plan rather than isolated incidents. Reports indicate Murphy stated that what's happening in Minneapolis isn't going to be isolated to that one city. That as Trump continues staffing up with officers who allegedly aren't trained for this kind of work, the same operations are coming to Philadelphia, Phoenix, and cities across the country. That this could be rolling out nationwide according to a pattern rather than responding to specific local situations. Think about what that assessment implies. Murphy might be arguing there's a template being applied, that certain cities are being selected for these operations based on criteria that have nothing to do with actual immigration enforcement needs. And if you look at the cities Murphy mentioned, they're all in swing states. Minneapolis in Minnesota, Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, Phoenix in Arizona. These are battleground locations where control of state governments and election systems could determine national outcomes. And sources suggest Murphy made the stakes explicit, that if these operations aren't stopped, if what's happening in Minnesota continues spreading, people being killed for exercising First Amendment rights will become a regular feature of American life. That's dystopian language. That's a senator saying we're heading toward authoritarian governance, where federal forces kill citizens for protesting and face no consequences. Murphy further allegedly argued this should unite Republicans and Democrats, that defending constitutional rights and preventing federal violence against citizens isn't a partisan issue, that Republicans and Democrats around the country are increasingly united in opposing these lawless operations. And if Murphy's right that bipartisan opposition is building, that could create political pressure even Trump can't ignore completely. But the most significant aspect of Murphy's warning might be his characterization of how agents operate, that they're unbelievably lawless, that normal rules and accountability mechanisms don't apply to them, that they function outside constitutional constraints that would govern regular law enforcement. When a senator describes federal agents as lawless, he's potentially accusing the Trump administration of creating forces that answer only to the president rather than to law. Now let's get to what might be the most explosive part of Murphy's testimony, his analysis of Attorney General Pam Bondi's letter to Minnesota officials, because if Murphy's interpretation is accurate, this letter could be smoking gun evidence of election interference being conducted openly by the Trump administration. Reports indicate Bondi's letter offered to remove ICE from Minnesota if the state does three things. First, share all records on Medicaid and food assistance programs. Second, repeal sanctuary policies. Third, allow the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division access to voter rolls. Sources suggest Murphy focused particularly on that third demand about voter access. Think about what that third condition might mean. The federal government demanding access to state voter registration lists, not for legitimate voting rights enforcement, but allegedly as the price for ending federal violence that the Trump administration's own agents are creating. That's potentially extortion. Give us control of your election systems or we'll continue allowing our forces to create chaos and kill your citizens. And Murphy allegedly connected this directly to Trump's stated regrets about 2020. That Trump has said repeatedly his mistake was not seizing voting machines. That he's been explicit about wishing he'd interfered more aggressively in previous elections, When a president openly admits he regrets not interfering in elections, and then his attorney general offers to end violence in exchange for voter roll access, the connection might not be coincidental. Murphy reportedly laid out what the strategy could be, that the Trump administration might be creating mayhem, particularly in swing state cities, that they're making situations appear out of control, that they're building justification for federal intervention by claiming state governments can't maintain order, and then using that manufactured crisis to demand control of election systems as the price for ending chaos Trump's own people created. Murphy allegedly acknowledged this might sound conspiratorial to some people, but he argued Trump has told us repeatedly what he wants to do, that Trump's statements about regretting not interfering more in 2020 should be taken seriously as statements of intent. That Bondi's letter appears to be pretty definitive proof that they're trying to trade ICE presence and the violence it creates for control of Minnesota's elections. But before Murphy's testimony, Dana Bash had interviewed Bovino, and sources suggest that exchange revealed just how completely divorced from reality the official Trump administration narrative has become, because Bovino allegedly claimed the real victims weren't the people shot by agents, but the agents themselves. And that inversion of victim and perpetrator might represent the most Orwellian aspect of Trump's entire operation. Reports indicate Bovino was pressed about video showing a person holding what appears to be a cell phone rather than a weapon. That multiple camera angles capture someone recording the incident, not brandishing a gun. And Bovino reportedly couldn't explain why official statements claimed the person was armed when video suggests otherwise. He allegedly deflected to saying investigations would eventually answer those questions. But then Bash apparently asked about basic human nature. When someone gets pushed down by law enforcement, isn't the instinct to help that person? And Bovino's response allegedly revealed the administration's position on what citizens should do when witnessing federal force. That you should follow directions from law enforcement, that you shouldn't inject yourself into law enforcement situations, that compliance is mandatory even when witnessing what might be excessive force. Think about what that standard means. If you see federal agents potentially hurting someone, your obligation under Bovino's framework is to stand back and let it happen. No matter what your instincts say, no matter what your conscience tells you, no matter what constitutional rights you might have, the only acceptable response is compliance with federal authority, regardless of what that authority is doing. And then came what sources describe as the most appalling moment. When Bash suggested it felt like Bovino was blaming victims, he reportedly responded by saying the victims are the Border Patrol agents, that the agents who shot someone are the real victims, that the person who was shot put himself in that situation. That's complete inversion of responsibility. The people with guns and badges and legal authority aren't accountable for using force. The citizens they shoot are responsible for being shot. Share this with everyone because this framework might reveal the entire Trump administration approach to accountability. Federal agents can never be at fault. Citizens who end up harmed by federal force are always responsible for their own harm through failure to comply adequately. The government is always the victim when citizens resist or question or fail to follow orders perfectly. That's not law enforcement operating under constitutional constraints. That could be authoritarianism where state force can't be questioned. But there's another dimension to this situation that sources suggest could create problems for Trump's MAGA coalition. The gun rights advocacy groups are reportedly caught in an impossible contradiction between their usual positions and their desire to support Trump. And that contradiction might expose how hollow their constitutional principles actually are. Reports indicate the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus issued a statement defending the person who was shot, stating that despite speculation about intent, there's been no evidence produced indicating intent to harm officers, calling for full investigation by state and federal authorities, asserting that every peaceable citizen has the right to keep and bear arms. Think about what that statement represents. Gun rights advocates defending someone's Second Amendment rights to carry a firearm, arguing that mere possession of a weapon doesn't justify being shot by government agents, demanding investigations into whether federal force was appropriate. Those are all positions completely consistent with gun rights philosophy. The problem is they contradict Trump administration claims about the incident. And sources suggest this creates a split in the MAGA coalition that might be difficult to paper over. Gun rights absolutists who believe the Second Amendment protects carrying weapons even in tense situations, versus law and order supporters who believe federal agents should have unlimited discretion to use force against anyone they perceive as threatening. Those positions might be fundamentally incompatible. This contradiction could become more significant as ICE operations expand to other states. When gun rights advocates in Texas or Arizona or other pro-Second Amendment states see federal agents shooting people for possessing firearms, are they going to maintain Trump loyalty? Or are they going to prioritize gun rights over partisan affiliation? And there's the broader question of whether MAGA voters will accept federal agents operating outside constitutional constraints when those agents are targeting people in their own communities. It's one thing to support aggressive immigration enforcement when it's happening somewhere else. It's different when federal forces are creating chaos in your city, potentially shooting people, operating with what Murphy called complete lawlessness. Now let's focus specifically on the election interference evidence Murphy highlighted, because if his analysis is accurate, the Bondi letter might represent the most explicit attempt at election manipulation we've seen. And the fact that it's happening openly through official channels rather than secretly could indicate Trump believes he can get away with it. The 3 demands in Bondi's letter allegedly weren't random. Sources suggest each one serves specific purposes that could enable election interference. Access to Medicaid and food assistance records potentially provides data on vulnerable populations who might be targeted for voter intimidation or removal from rolls. Repealing sanctuary policies forces local officials to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement, creating leverage for future demands. And voter roll access is the ultimate prize that could allow manipulation of who's eligible to vote. Think about what Trump could potentially do with unrestricted access to Minnesota's voter registration data. Compare it against other databases to identify people who might be challenged. Use it to target certain communities with aggressive federal enforcement during election periods. Create justifications for claiming elections are invalid because certain people voted who allegedly shouldn't have. The possibilities for manipulation become endless once federal government controls state voter information, and the fact that this access is allegedly being demanded in exchange for ending federal violence makes it extortion rather than legitimate oversight. Minnesota citizens are being terrorized by federal agents. The federal government then offers to stop the terrorism if the state hands over election control. That's not negotiation between government levels. That could be hostage-taking where election systems are the ransom. Sources indicate Murphy called this letter wild and said Minnesota shouldn't stand for it, that the American people shouldn't accept this kind of trade. But the question is whether there's any mechanism to stop it. If Trump controls federal forces creating the chaos and demands election access as the price for ending chaos, what power do state governments have to resist? But Murphy's testimony allegedly ended with what sources characterize as a call to resistance. Not just criticism of what's happening, but explicit statement that Americans cannot allow these operations to continue. That this moment represents a critical juncture where opposition could still prevent dystopian outcomes, but only if people act decisively. Reports indicate Murphy used language suggesting urgency, that we have to stop this in its tracks, not just monitor it or express concern, actually halt the operations before they expand further and become impossible to reverse. That what's happening in Minnesota represents the future of America if allowed to continue. That preventing it now is the only opportunity to avoid having federal forces killing citizens for exercising constitutional rights become normalized. And Murphy allegedly argued this situation creates opportunity for fundamental reform. That the shocking nature of what's happening, the video evidence contradicting official lies, the brazenness of the election interference attempt, all of it could motivate changes that weren't possible before. That this might be the moment to not just reform ICE but abolish it entirely and replace it with immigration enforcement that operates under constitutional constraints. Think about what seizing this moment could mean. Using the outrage over Minnesota to build coalitions demanding comprehensive immigration reform. using the evidence of election interference to justify federal legislation protecting voter access from presidential manipulation, using Murphy's testimony as foundation for congressional investigations that could lead to impeachment articles, turning this crisis into catalyst for preventing future crises rather than just surviving this one. Share this video with everyone you know because Murphy's warning about cities across America suggests time is limited. If Philadelphia and Phoenix and other swing state locations are next, if this rolls out nationwide before opposition can organize, preventing it becomes exponentially harder. The moment to act is now while operations are still relatively contained and while public attention is focused on Minneapolis. So here's what Senator Chris Murphy's testimony revealed. Federal officials might be lying brazenly to the American public when everyone can see video contradicting their claims. ICE operations could be deliberately creating chaos and violence rather than trying to maintain order. The strategy might involve manufacturing crises in swing state cities specifically to justify federal seizure of election systems. Attorney General Pam Bondi allegedly offered to end the violence in exchange for Minnesota giving Trump's Justice Department access to voter rolls. And Trump has stated repeatedly he regrets not interfering more aggressively in previous elections, making the connection between federal violence and election manipulation potentially explicit. The implications are staggering. If Murphy's analysis is accurate, Americans aren't watching immigration enforcement. They might be witnessing authoritarian groundwork for seizing control of democratic processes. Federal agents creating chaos their administration can then exploit to claim states can't govern themselves and need federal intervention in election systems. Violence as negotiating tactic, where ending it requires surrendering constitutional authority over voting. Murphy called the administration's behavior bone-chilling and said it should unite Republicans and Democrats in opposition. He warned what's happening in Minneapolis is coming to cities across America if not stopped immediately. He characterized Bondi's letter as definitive proof of election interference being traded for ending mayhem Trump's administration created. And he argued this moment demands resistance because allowing these operations to continue means accepting dystopian future where federal forces kill citizens with impunity. Make sure you're subscribed to Patrick Smith Show because we're covering every development in what Murphy exposed. Every piece of evidence connecting ICE operations to election interference. Every city where similar operations might be rolled out. Every opportunity for congressional or legal resistance. This could be the moment where Americans either stop authoritarian seizure of democracy or watch it happen while constitutional protections become meaningless. Stay tuned.